You can't control rivers. We try to, but they have the last say. That river has weaved back and forth over the millions of years all across this whole valley. And there have been scores of floods for the last couple hundreds of years. I remember there was one flood, I don't remember the date, it was called the Pumpkin Flood because it happened in October. High water picked up all the pumpkins out of all the pumpkin patches and they went floating down the river. The most recent was the flood of '72, and that's when Hurricane Agnes came through.
Tropical Storm Agnes was the Atlantic's first tropical storm and hurricane of the season in 1972. A rare June storm, it would become the most devastating of its kind up to that point in history, killing 129 people on the East Coast and causing $1.7 billion in damages. From June 20th to June 24th, the storm poured an estimated 1/4 the volume of Lake Erie on the East Coast. Instead of heading up the coast and out to sea, however, the storm stalled over northern Pennsylvania and southern New York.
I think that during the total event, it was recorded that they experienced about 14 inches of sustained rainfall in, I think it was a 48-hour period. We received here in Elmira about 8 inches of rain during that event. What the net effect of that was to absolutely overload most of the tributaries to the Chemung River. The river level rose over I believe it was a 3-day period, to a point that just on June 21 of 1972, I believe that it was expected to crest about 3 feet below the actual levee and flood control wall height, which is 23.5 feet. What occurred, though, is there was apparently a miscalculation of the volume of rain that was being collected and discharged by the Tioga River that basically overloaded the entire system and ultimately led on June 22nd to the overtopping of our levees.
At 4:30 a.m. on Friday, a dike in nearby Painted Post broke. 4 other dikes breached. Water rushed towards Elmira and eventually breached the city's dikes and levees at 8 points. Twice the volume of water from the 100-year flood of 1946 rushed through the city streets. City streets became raging rivers. Residents scrambled for shelter and watched helplessly as the waters relentlessly poured over the flood wall like an invading army.
The 1972 Agnes flood was roughly double the water volume. It was some amount of water passing through Elmira between 200,000 cubic feet per second and 300. It was beyond what we would refer to as the 100-year storm event. It was either equivalent to a 500-year storm event or possibly even a 1,000-year storm event.
Though there was no loss of life in Elmira, the effects of the storm were felt the hardest there. The waters completely covered the downtown area. The newly completed Chemung Canal Trust Company headquarters, opened just weeks earlier, now had 6 feet of floodwater in its lobby. 15,000 people were evacuated. Temporary shelters were erected. Churches and community agencies sprang into action to assist the displaced. President Nixon declared Chemung County a disaster area. The devastation was absolute. Debris littered the streets, making them virtually impassable. A thick, heavy layer of mud covered everything in the city. When the mud dried, dust clouds followed everywhere travelers went. Priceless possessions became piles of worthless junk. City streets that were packed with shoppers just a few days earlier resembled a war zone. Cars were tossed around like toys, homes were washed off their foundations, and city streets were ripped up and destroyed by the massive floodwaters. In many cases, the streets were not just impassable, they simply didn't exist.
The immediate effect was our transportation system, bridge crossings were virtually made inoperable. Our telephone system, because the main switch at that time is located in downtown Elmira, was inundated. So telephone service was lost. Broadcasting, electricity, they were all affected immediately. sewage treatment plant was taken out of commission. The water purification system was out.
Literally overnight, the entire infrastructure of an American city had all but disappeared.